So credit for the transaction is for Itai Frischman, my partner, who led the deal on the buy side. So let's begin and try to talk about the Israeli tech scene in numbers. Everyone in this crowd understands the importance of data, even lawyers and politicians. But let's face it, stats are really boring, and it's difficult to tell a story using only stats. When thinking about this lecture, I ran through 2017 in my mind and thought and raised one question. What is the most important data point in 2017 that I would like to present in front of this crowd? What is the real story behind the numbers? In the next few slides, I'll try to share with you my perspective about the Israeli tech scene. In this slide, we're talking about exit events, and with $23 billion of exit value in 2017, one would think that this is the most important data point for 2017. I beg to differ. It's an impressive number, but if we exclude from the equation the two large transactions, the Mobileye transaction and the Neodam transactions, their impact on the number is so big that we see different results. And if we compare 2014 and 15 with the years 16 and 17, we can see that there is definitely a slowdown in numbers of the number of the deals and the deal volume. And we don't have in a 10-minute talk time to describe the reasons for the slowdown. Some of them include expectations from tax reforms in the US. Others include regulatory obstacles imposed on Chinese players, at times bringing transactions to a halt. What I want to point out here is that part of it has to do with the fact that our industry is maturing. For years, Israeli founders were criticized for selling companies too early in the game. This is definitely changing, as I'll try to show through the numbers. And part of the change has to do with the larger companies. And it's interesting to show that in the recent years, we had 8 companies being sold for over $1 billion. I said we have to exclude them out of the math to show the numbers if you want to understand the industry as a whole, but we don't have to, we can't disregard them. With companies, unicorns such as Infinidat, Taboola, or ironSource, and the funding trends that I will show in future slides, I believe that this picture of companies being sold for over $1 billion will present itself as being more and more companies, and the industry, as I said, is maturing. And it's maturing also if we look at the buy side of companies. This is a partial, if we think about the usual suspects of who are acquiring Israeli companies, those are the usual suspects. As we'll see, as we saw in recent years, new players came into town, and we have companies that were never active in Israel buying Israeli companies. But what's the interesting data point is that second to the US, we have Israeli companies buying Israeli companies. Now, this slide is somewhat misleading because it talks about the number of deals and not the deal value. But it shows that Israeli companies are learning and understanding that inorganic growth is an important factor for them, and it's part of part of the theme I'm trying to present, that the industry is maturing. It's not that we don't make mistakes. Let's take specific sectors, and we took cybersecurity as a sector. Definitely too many companies were formed in Israel. With over 500 companies being formed in the last 5 years, there are just too many companies to support. Many of them are dealing with niche problems that will be of no interest to companies and for the purchasers. Some of them with overlapping technologies. Let's talk about the cybersecurity for the automotive industry. We have 4 companies in the same sector active in Israel, all of them competing for the same talent, all of them competing for funding, all of them competing for tractions with T1 players and OEMs. This is not going to last. Now, the sector as a whole is doing very well. But in my mind, this is not going to last. This is a snapshot of where we are today. We will lack funding. As we can see, We have less money being deployed in the security sector. But the interesting data point is that although the number has dropped to $500 million last year, the investments are made into a fewer number of companies, again suggesting that we'll have less companies, but those companies will be stronger, they'll be healthier, they'll be bigger. And if we're talking about segments which were overhyped, let's talk about mistakes we've made in the sectors which were undercapitalized. And I'm pointing out at the semiconductor segment. With the amount of money being invested, this is not enough to support an important segment in the industry. Now, the Cisco-Libat transaction and the Amazon Annapurna transaction show the appetite companies have for talented teams in the semi-industry. Cisco probably broke a world record by buying a semi-company 18 months after its inception. Amazon, with Annapurna, did almost the same. They paid a healthy price, but in my mind, they have the upper hand, and they're doing very well with the acquisitions, only showing that we have not invested enough in this sector. We did not build the sector, we did not deploy the money where we should have. The money that is being invested in a handful of companies. Some of them are well known, such as Vayar and Valence are doing well. Some of them are under the radar. They all do well, but we are making mistakes. In this slide, I want to show that we need to be a bit modest. The industry is maturing, it's growing, but don't be impressed by the number of the IPOs that took place in 2017. Most of them were Mickey Mouse IPOs, as we can see here, with very few money being raised as a substitution for fundraising. In my mind, we still lack as an industry the ability to scale. We don't have the talent. We do not have many players such as Gil Schwed. So the fact that the industry is growing, we are moving from pure technology sales to companies, doesn't mean that we have the talent to scale. And if we don't have the talent to scale, NASDAQ is not an opportunity for most companies. In a good year, we'll have 1, 2, or maybe 3 companies going public in NASDAQ. For those who think that the public market is the right market, they will need to think about other markets, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, maybe Tel Aviv. But the public market, the NASDAQ market, will not be open for most of the companies in Israel, even though we're scaling and we're growing. In terms of the amount of money that is being deployed, we can see that there's a constant growth in the amount of money. But again, the nice thing about it, and I think the good news about it, that the amount of money that is being deployed is larger, but the number of companies that are being funded are smaller. Again, suggesting that we are growing bigger, larger companies, and we're changing the horizon with most Israeli companies. We still very much depend on the foreign investors and the foreign VCs in our industry, as can be seen in this slide. The problem that we have in the funding is the fact that, like in the US, there's a very strong decline in the seed and the early stage investments, whereas we can see that the mid-stage and the late stage are pretty much stable. And to prove the point that I was making about money being injected in companies and founders thinking about growth, these slides make this point. As we can see, we try to look at companies who raised $30 million or more, and we can see that there's a constant growth throughout the years, with 2017 proposing 41 companies that raised more than $30 million in a round of financing. And I think this is the most important data point for the year 2017, because it does show that the industry is changing. But if this is the most important data point, why did I leave it at number 2? Well, I left it at number 2 because I took a step back from the industry and thought that the most interesting data point to show in front of this crowd is this one. Israel was ranked number 11 in the Happy Planet Index. We live in a crazy country called Israel, but I, for one, love it, and it seems that most Israelis love it. We're ranked higher than the US, we're ranked higher than Europe, many European countries, and probably, even though it's a crazy place, we're probably doing a few things. So I have a lot of criticism about statistics. As I said, they're boring, but I hope to try to present a snapshot about our industry. And the main thing that I try to present is the fact that the industry is maturing, that we will produce larger and stronger companies, and that is what I hope will be proven in the next following years. Thank you very much for your time.